Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be. I don't know about you, but it is really hot here today. It's heat wave, and I'm going to talk about cigarettes and coronavirus in this post. Now, I don't smoke, but my husband does, so I'm quite interested in the stories about how 4 times fewer people who smoke end up in the hospital with coronavirus. But if they are admitted, their outcomes are worse than those of non-smokers, possibly due to abrupt nicotine withdrawal. This evidence that cigarettes have a protective effect against coronavirus for some populations is quite robust from country to country, yet there are some exceptions. The countries in which smoking seems to have a protective effect do not have an obesity epidemic, and it is known that the virus uses fat cells to help itself reproduce. In Texas, young people are showing up in the hospital with bad COVID cases, and they frequently have a history of smoking, vaping, and obesity. It would make sense that if people start smoking in an effort to lose weight, any protective effect would be counteracted by underlying health issues. If a person with a healthy weight started smoking, you would get a completely different outcome. Now, I wanted to understand the mechanism of this protective effect from cigarettes, so I started reading. I kept finding articles about the stress that the virus puts on T cells themselves, and that in people who die from it, their lymph tissue shows a total collapse of the T cell population, like in an AIDS patient. As in, the virus went after the T cells, the protecting cells, and infiltrated the lymph tissue, which went into overdrive and collapsed. This is similar due to getting all blocked up. This is similar to what happens in the lungs of a COVID patient. It attacks the cells that typically mount a defense, and then the body produces more defensive cells that get attacked, and the whole system just gets gummed up with dead cells because the cells responsible for removing debris are overwhelmed. I think that might be why smokers are dying of the disease less often than non-smokers. It's because they already have an amped up trash disposal system in their lungs. They have a thicker layer of crap, and that keeps the system from getting gummed up when the rate of cell death suddenly spikes. I can't imagine that the constriction and hardening of a smoker's blood vessels helps them fight the disease, but sometimes understanding the balance of the human body is difficult. I've read articles about how COVID softens blood vessels to an unhealthy degree, so maybe this hardening acts as a counterbalance. In the medical literature, this balance is typically explained in terms of ACE2 expression. This anti-inflammatory effect of nicotine might also play a helpful role throughout the body. It is well known that nicotine has a protective effect on the joints and the brain. Perhaps the constriction of blood vessels allows the trash disposal system of the cerebral spinal fluid and lymph fluid to behave more efficiently so that those systems don't get gummed up with dead, decaying cells. When the blood vessels are constricted, other fluids can flow more freely. There is also a very interesting story about nicotine and vaccines, but that is a tangential issue, and I have it linked in the blog post below. I think that what nicotine does is similar to the exfoliation of skin with vitamin A. Vitamin A causes the skin to turn over more rapidly, and this makes it peel, but over time it thickens and makes it look younger. In a smoker's lungs, their cells may be turning over more rapidly and creating a thicker layer of epithelial cells, but the drawback of having your cells turn over so much is that each time a cell is reborn, there is a probability that it will have an error in how the genetic code is copied, and those errors can cause cells to become cancerous. So I have an article here from Animal Studies of Cigarette Exposure, and it's kind of full of jargon, but it spoke to these issues. Besides functional alterations, cigarette smoke causes important structural alterations to the respiratory epithelium. Different studies have shown that cigarette smoke causes a reduction of cell viability and an induction of apoptosis in respiratory hair cells. Opposite mitogenic effects, or pro-apoptotic apoptotic depending on the cigarette smoke concentration, or even an impairment on epithelial regeneration upon injury. Animal studies have shown that chronic and intermittent exposure to cigarette smoke cause morphological alterations to the epithelium of the entire respiratory tract, from hyperplasia in lower concentrations all the way to loss of cilia and metaplasia, with keratinization in higher concentrations, and also submucosal thickening and inflammation with neutrophilic and mononuclear inflammatory cells infiltrate. Also, Ham et al. Showed that cigarette-induced respiratory mucosa inflammatory reaction persists even after 7 months of recovery. So I hear this and I think, so this enhanced mucus production, it'll keep going even for 6 months after you've stopped smoking. Studies carried out with smokers have confirmed these findings in animal models, showing alterations in the respiratory epithelium as an enlargement of the naked epithelium, a greater prevalence of hyperplasia and cell atypias, well, it's cancer, and ultrastructural cilia abnormalities. So, I mean, you can imagine, let's see. There's also, of course, the buildup of tar and other pollutants, and these things all gum up the works and prevent air from getting to living cells in a person with, say, emphysema. Whereas with COVID, it is dead cells that are preventing the air from getting to the living cells. And if a smoker's lungs have an improved ability to clear out dead cells, that might be the reason why they are not getting as bad of cases of coronavirus. But in general, when Corona visits my house, I'll be drinking coffee because it's, you gotta keep your spirits up. And I've also in another post talked about Artemisia annua, and I'll be drinking that kind of tea, and green tea and chamomile tea. I'll be making soup stock from scratch because everybody knows that soup is good for a cold. I will be doing sage, rosemary, and lavender smudges and steams to keep the viral load in the air low. I'll be taking aspirin, which is willow bark, as needed. Aspirin has an antiviral effect, but I'll be careful not to take so much that my stomach bleeds. I'll be going for walks to prevent blood clots, and I'll be hoping that new treatments are widely available. I probably will not be smoking. I mean, I'm not a smoker, and I won't be smoking if I'm sick, but I do think that I might actually smoke a bit if I hear that there is a wave of coronavirus coming to my city, just because the evidence is somewhat convincing that there is a protective effect, and it's almost as strong as what you would expect from a vaccine. It's like, if you just run those numbers, the smokers have the equivalent of an 80% effective vaccine. Wow. So, but I really don't like the effect that cigarettes have on my mind and my memory. They make me feel more focused and present, but I think they contract the blood flow in my brain and limit my ability to search my memories. I mean, and I rely heavily on my memory when I'm writing. So what I picture is that when you take a cigarette, the circulation contracts, but that allows more of these lymph and cerebral spinal fluid to flow through your brain and clear away all the crap that accumulates. So I'm not a medical professional. Disclaimer, I am just a person who wants to know about these things and thought maybe somebody else might want to know too. So thank you for watching. My other videos are mostly on physics and philosophy and things like that, so I hope you tune into those. I've been told they're a bit like science ASMR, and yeah. Thanks for watching.